Walking without skin. Managing adversity with vulnerability.
Pain is wrong, every inch of my heart like an open wound. I can't go on, I'll drown if I don't stop the bleeding soon.
What I realized was that these weren't really lessons I was learning. This was fruit that I was harvesting from seeds that my grandmother had planted in me and in others many years before. I became aware of my identity or my sexuality, my gayness, if you will. I probably was more aware of that at an earlier age than I was aware of my blackness and how that showed up in the world.
Where can I find some protection to prevent this ongoing infection? I'm walking without skin. Walking without skin.
You are listening to Walking Without Skin, the show where we encourage our guests to be vulnerable, to share their voices with authenticity, to tell their stories from the heart. We will talk about hope and recovery, about overcoming loss, changes, challenges, and adversities. We will walk without skin.
How will I know when it's safer? When every step feels like sandpaper. I'm walking without skin.
And here is your host, Lois Wagner.
Hi, I am Lois, your friend for forgiveness and the creator of Walking Without Skin. I have a book with the same title, Walking Without Skin. And today, all the way from Los Angeles, I have the pleasure of speaking with Cedrick Bridgeforth. Hi, Cedrick.
Hello, Lois.
How are you today?
I'm doing well, and thank you for having me on.
We've got like a 12-hour time difference between us. So thank you.
We'll fill it with conversation.
Good. All 12 hours. Thank you so much for joining me. So Cedrick, he says he is Southern, Black, gay, fatherless, Air Force veteran, ordained minister. Born in Alabama, now lives in California as an out gay minister. Congratulations for doing that.
Thank you.
So before we get into what you're about, please can you tell me, what do you understand by the term walking without skin?
What I understand about the term walking without skin, it's being fully exposed and transparent and authentic in oneself.
Perfect. And that's exactly what you are.
That's my goal. That's actually my goal. Yeah.
Now, I'm just going to read this for our listeners. It's a memoir. It's called Alabama Grandson, a Black gay minister's passage out of hiding. It chronicles Cedrick's journey from childhood antics to adulthood heroics that teeters between the absurd and the profane, but lands in a place of healing and grace, where authenticity was revealed in him choosing to live authentically in every arena of life. That definitely sounds like a book worth reading. Would you like to tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Thanks for the question and for this chance to have some conversation about it. Yeah, it's a book that just really, as the blurb says, it chronicles my life from the time of my birth in rural North Alabama to my parents. It talks about my deep abiding love for my grandmother and the many life lessons that she taught me. It follows me throughout high school, my time serving in the Air Force, discovering the true nature of my paternity, which was kept secret from me up until about age 17. And then my journey into vocation, serving the church as an ordained minister, and just struggle of doing all of that while also coming to terms with my identity, not only as a gay person, but also as a Black person in the United States.
Yeah, it's a lot to deal with. So let's just start by saying, give me an example of something absurd in your book.
Something absurd in my book would probably be a story, I forget which chapter it's in, but it's a story from high school where I had taken to this experiment with uppers, pills, if you will. Some friends of mine were taking them. I started taking them just because it was fun to do. And I came across some muscle relaxers that I got from my grandmother's medicine cabinet without her permission, obviously. And I took them to school. I gave one to a friend of mine. He took it and came back to me after second period and said, "Oh, that didn't do anything. Give me another one." And I was like, "I don't know." And he said, "Oh, give me it." So I gave him another one. And of course, his second period class was typing. And I don't know if you've ever taken a muscle relaxer, but a muscle relaxer in the body of a 17-year-old in a typing class is not going to go well. So he ends up in the office. I get called to the office because he told him that I gave him something. Of course, I go to the office. I pretend I have no idea what he's talking about. We get suspended from school until we can't come back to school until our moms come and speak with the principal. And I spent all weekend afraid to tell my mom what had happened. But I waited till late Sunday night and told her, I got suspended on Friday and I can't go back to school until you come. And she basically blew me off, was like, "Well, you deal with that." But she did come, and that meeting with the principal ended with her, sitting there listening to all that they had to say about what had happened. Of course, I was using the deny strategy. And eventually she had heard enough, and she stopped the whole conversation and said to the principal, she said, "Excuse me, but if you think he's here doing drugs, selling drugs, or knows where drugs are, don't call me, call the police. I have to go to work." And she got up and walked out.
Oh, and what was the outcome of that?
Well, the outcome of that was the principals knew we were up to no good, but they really didn't have any proof. So they let us slide and we moved on. I never took another unprescribed pill ever again. So, but that experiment did lead to an encounter with my mom, where she was like really just on me for lying and for doing something that I was not supposed to do. But it also gave me the courage to confront her about my paternity. And so it led to another awakening as well.
And have you met your birth parents?
Well, my mother, I grew up with my mother, but my biological father, I was introduced to him, Lois, but I talk about this in the book, when I was introduced to him in a car parked outside of a Kentucky Fried Chicken. He got in the car in the back seat behind me. I was seated in the passenger seat. He got in the back seat behind me. My mom told me who he was, told him who I was. We had some small talk. She got out of the car. We had more small talk. She came back. He said, "I have to go to work." He got out. I never turned around, never looked at him. And so I only live with two regrets in my life. One of them is that I never turned to look him in the eye, because I wonder what difference that would have made, because we've never been able to be in each other's presence ever again. And if he walked in my house right now, I wouldn't know who he was. So I still carry that.
And there's nothing you can do to arrange a meeting?
Well, I've tried, and I even talk about it in the book, try to connect with him. And we've made arrangements to meet. Well, we've made arrangements to make arrangements to meet. And he's never honored any of those. And so for the last 20 plus years, 22, 23 years, I've just let it go and haven't tried anymore.
Do you think he's read your book?
Ooh, that's an interesting. You're the first person to ask me that question. I don't know. There's part of me that my gut reaction is no, because I want to believe that if he read it, he would make a different choice. Yeah, I want to believe that if he read it, he would say, "I better call this guy before he writes his second book."
Oh, so there's a second book on the table, is there?
Or maybe he's writing his own book. I don't know. Maybe that's what's happening.
What is profane in your book?
Well, yeah. Well, it's really, that's just some of the marketing language that's there. But that really gets more at some of the contradictions that exist in my life, of growing up as a person of deep faith. My family was a very faith-rooted, church-going, Bible-believing, family. And, that brings with it a certain taboos, if you will. Being gay is not something that was allowed or accepted. So there's that contradiction. There's also the fact that much of my life has been spent in and around institutions that were not always affirming of who I was or am as an individual, be it the church, my family, the military, all places where I've had to find a way to show up and try to offer my absolute best, but doing so really against the rules.
So what prompted you to start writing this book?
Well, I turned 50. There's something about being half 100 that, it's a time of awakening. It really can't. It's kind of a funny thing. My therapist told me that I needed to join a group or become a part of some activity, something that would not allow me to be in charge or to lead it in any way. Find some group or activity for you to participate in where you can't lead or be in charge in any way. And the reason for that was, he said, I have a warped sense of how the world works because I end up leading most of the things that I'm involved with. So one of the things I decided I wanted to do was I wanted to get back to journaling and writing because I've always enjoyed writing. And so I went on meetup.com. I found a writing group and I said, oh, cool. I'm not going to organize a writing group. I don't even know how to do that. So I'll join this. This will be fun. I can do some writing. And so that was how I got back that's how I got into the writing group. But at the same time, I went back to Alabama for a visit. And like on all of my visits, I went to the cemetery where my ancestors are buried. I always visit there and just found myself thinking just about my life. In fact, I was half 100. And I started journaling just some experiences. And it began then as a series of letters to my grandmother introducing my current self to her. That's what I wanted to write in this meetup group. It was not an attempt to put together a manuscript by any means. This was just a writing exercise for me to purge some thoughts, get some deeper understanding. But what I found in that was some profound connections as I was, telling different stories about my life and noting lessons that I learned or I thought I was learning in these through these stories. What I realized was that these weren't really lessons I was learning. This was fruit that I was harvesting from seeds that my grandmother had planted in me and in others many years before. And turns out the person who organized the meetup group was a publisher. She read some of my essays and said, I believe you have something here. And this became a side project. And she encouraged me to just write. Don't worry about the letter format. Just start telling your stories, writing your stories. And so I did that. And we ended up with a manuscript. So the book, I think, is around 300 pages in published form, but there's probably about 500 or 600 pages that were written as part of the original exercise.
So is it just a book of short stories, or does it take you from childhood up to adulthood?
Well, it's not told linearly. The book is not written, I was born and then, when I was 6, then it's not told that way. It's really organized in 7 chapters. It's in 2 parts, 7 chapters, and really is organized around 7 major lessons. And so there are a variety of stories. And so it moves forward and backwards in each chapter. It goes forward and backwards just around a variety of lessons that I believe I am learning and that are unfolding throughout my life journey. So yeah, it's a meandering narrative.
It's similar to my book. My book is also around the lessons rather than a linear journey. So,
Yeah, it seemed to, I mean, that's how my brain works. And when I tell story publicly, that's how it works. It's kind of this circular thing, that you start here and you go around and you come back to that point and, well, that's done. And then you start somewhere else, right? So that's how the book got put together as well.
Okay, so you call yourself master of hiding in plain sight. What were you hiding in plain sight?
Well, a lot of things, in some places, I think I can note that I became aware of my identity or my sexuality, my gayness, if you will. I probably was more aware of that at an earlier age than I was aware of my Blackness and how that showed up in the world. And so I think I took more care of that part of my identity and, in ensuring that I wasn't either found out or caught or misrepresented in some way along the way, because I knew the repercussions of that, given the context that I was growing up in. And so that was something that I learned how to do. So I was always a very studious person. I've kept very busy in my life. And in reflecting back, Lois, I think a lot of my accomplishments were smokescreens, right? It's like, well, if he's super busy, if he's always accomplishing something, that's why he's not in a relationship, or that's why he's not married, or that's why he doesn't have children. He's in school, or he's, working on this promotion, or he's working on this major project. So I think in a lot of ways, the accomplishment, became sort of my shield throughout life.
I can relate to that. So, Cedrick, you talk about your 7 lessons that you structured your book around. Would you like to share some of those lessons with us?
Sure. And I've said to people, if they never read the book, great. You can go to Amazon and just do the click on look inside and you can see the table of contents. And I think those 7 chapter headings are just mantras or lessons that most people can shape some sort of activity around to improve any part of every day. But the first one is trust your gut. And that's really about listening to that little voice that's inside that I think at a very early age, we're taught to silence and not to trust, but it's there to protect us, to give us those insights that nobody else and nothing else can give to us. So it's really about nurturing that voice and really, trusting that yearning and those promptings that come from within. That's a huge one for me. And it's interesting that it ended up being the first one in the book, because I think it's the one that I'm still learning and working on probably more than the other 6, right? Because that's one that you have to fine tune over and over again, through practice. Another one is manage your losses, because all of us experience loss in our lives, be it jobs, relationships, money, opportunities, hopes, dreams, we lose, right? But the gift in all of this is really learning how to continue to live beyond those losses. And it's not about getting over it. It's about living through it and, learning what we can from whatever devastation, whatever trauma, whatever it is that we've missed or that we're missing, but using that really as fuel for the rest of the journey, using it to light our pathway forward in a way that maybe, it wasn't lit before we did that. And I would say another one I would lift up would be, I think it's chapter 5 or 6, listen well. I don't have them memorized in order, but I think it's listen well, because, and I just think just with the state of the world, there's not a lot of listening that's happening. Everybody's talking. But I believe if we can learn to listen well, not just to that inner voice that we have, but to really listen to the hearts of those that we're in relationship with, to really listen to the cries and the yearnings of our communities and our broader world that is seeking, I hope, for something greater than what we currently have, but really to just pay attention not just to what's spoken, but to what's not spoken and what's not allowed to be spoken. I think that could go a long way for us as individuals, but for us as a people in the world as well.
If we go back to lesson 2, which is about managing your loss, that's about resilience. It's about working through your problems, getting back on your feet after that loss, whatever it is. Do you have a tip or piece of advice on how people can do that?
Advice. I always stray away from giving advice. All my friends will tell you that, right? But let me try since we have this time difference here. Let's allow those 12 hours to do that for us. I find that reflection is key. And it's not trying to replay an experience or replay the scenario, if I would have, or, if I had to do it all over again, this is what I do. I don't know that that's always helpful, right? But it's really paying attention to what did I know? What didn't I know? What was my body telling me? What did I feel was right? Which really connects back with the first, right? Of listening to your gut. Maybe that's why that one's first. That's why it's first, because it's woven into all of them. But really, I think just reflect, taking time to reflect, right? And really paying attention to what we've learned through those losses or because of those losses, addressing whatever issues of guilt or shame that we may want to carry in the midst of that. And then I would say whatever invitations we may have printed for our next pity party, throw those away. No one's coming to your pity party. It's time to celebrate that we're going to learn. We've learned something. We can trust that this experience, no matter how horrible it was, can teach us something, right? And we're going to harvest it for the lessons that it has brought and bring those forward. And that makes us stronger for the journey ahead.
Totally. It's the growth mindset. If you can learn from your mistakes, from your losses, from your experiences, you develop that growth mindset. And if you can use that to give back and to help others and develop a benefit mindset, that's better still.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And my grandmother would always, something would happen and she was quick to say, but did it kill you? And it's like, well, when you're 8, that question is an odd question, right? You're like, well, no, but, as an adult, it's like, no, if it had killed me, I wouldn't be here. So I'm still here. So there's purpose for my life. There's an opportunity for me to keep going, right? So the worst did not occur. It was bad, yes, but the worst thing did not occur. Didn't kill me. I'm still here. And if I'm here, I can learn. If I can learn, I can grow. And if I can grow, I can do better.
Wonderful. In your ministry, what experience have you had where a parishioner or somebody has done or said something that's really touched you and made you change the way you think or do things?
Well, that's a great question. I'll go with the first thing that came to mind. I had this retired pastor and his wife, Robert and Gwen Smith. Robert Smith was a longtime pastor in the area where I served, and he had retired, but he got called back into service at a local church, a little small church south of Los Angeles. And I went there to visit them at the church one Sunday, and they were there in the office. It was late in the afternoon. They were tying all these ribbons on these little bags, and so I was just standing there while this pastor and his wife are tying these little ribbons on all these bags. And I asked the question, what are all these bags for? And she says, oh, it's for all of the graduates. And I said, wow, you have a lot of graduates. Well, at my church, we only honored the high school graduates and the college graduates. And I knew that church that they were pastoring only had maybe about 30 people in it. So why would they have all these bags for all these graduates, right? And so I made some comment about, the number of graduates. And she says, oh, but we honor those who are graduating preschool, those who are graduating kindergarten, those who are graduating elementary school, those who are graduating middle school, those who are graduating high school and college and any vocational programs. We honor everybody who's graduating from anything. I said, well, but you're supposed to graduate from kindergarten and you're supposed to graduate from middle school, so that's why we celebrate high school as much as we do. And she looked at me and she said, everybody likes to be celebrated every now and again. And I closed my mouth, I, nodded, and I helped tie some ribbons on some bags. And from that point forward, I started honoring all the graduates too, right? Because everybody likes to be celebrated every now and again. And that really changed my focus in how I acknowledged even the smallest things that people might bring my way, not just in ministry, but also in my life.
That's a beautiful story. Your lesson 5 or whatever it was about listening, do you have any stories about where somebody listened to something you said and did something to change their life or to change their situation?
Oh, it happens all the time, Lois. Every time I say something, people, no. I would say that's what we want, right? That's what we want to happen. I would say one story that comes to mind, it's not in the book though, but one that happened a couple of years ago. I was a person that I had known just peripherally had passed away, and his aunt reached out to me to provide help with this funeral and memorial services. And so we were talking about that. And in the midst of that, she let me know that she had grown up in a Christian church, but had moved on to practice other religions in her life. And that one of the things that she had always struggled with, no matter what Christian denomination or what other faith tradition she found herself apart with, she said she'd always struggled with faith. She never felt she understood it or never really possessed it in a way that others around her did. And I just, I paused on that question because I could hear just in the way she named it that this was something she really was agonizing over. And I didn't understand, all of it, but this was clearly something of importance to her. And what I said to her was something that someone had told me probably about 10 or 12 years before that, was that you have the faith that you need for the circumstances that you're facing. That you may not have faith to the level that I do, or that your grandmother did, or that somebody else that you have seen, but for whatever it is you're facing, you have enough faith within you to get through it. And that's all you're accountable for. And she paused and she says, no one's ever told me that. She's like, I thought I had to have all this faith and it had to show up in every area of my life. And I was like, no, like whatever comes your way, it's yours to deal with. And you've prepared yourself and you've equipped yourself for what's coming your way. And so whatever's here, you have what you need to face it. And she said, I like that. I'm going to take that. And it was probably 3 years later before I spoke with her again and actually ran into her in a Macy's. And she came up to me and she says, I just want to thank you. I just want to thank you. It just changed my outlook on faith. And I've been telling everybody that ever since. And I was like, okay, so something in that struck a chord with her in the same way it struck a chord within me when it was shared with me.
Well, it makes so much sense, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's like, yeah. It's like I have what I need for what I'm facing. I don't need what you have. I need what I have to face what I'm facing. Yeah.
What inspires you, Cedrick?
What inspires me is other people doing well, and even people just striving to do well. Dreaming dreams and coming up with ideas that will improve their lives or improve the lives of others inspires me like nothing else. One of the things I get to do, in addition to ministry and all the work stuff that I do, I also work as an organizational development consultant. And I work with nonprofit organizations, and people, ask me, well, why do I do that? And it's part of that, right? It's helping those who are trying to do good to do it better. And so it's inspirational for me. It's a value that I hold, and it's something that's woven into my everyday life.
What is your big dream?
My big dream really is this the legacy question, or like when I'm gone question, or while I'm here question?
No, while
The
you're
thing I
here
want to see
question.
question.
While you're here.
Yeah, the while I'm here question. Yeah, the while I'm here question really is to ensure that day to day and over time, that the work that I do matters in people's lives. So for me, I don't have a dollar sign in mind. I don't have a big house on a hill in mind. I don't have a title or anything like that that I'm pursuing. For me, it's a day-to-day collection and collaboration of the work that I do and the relationships that I'm able to engage in, and just really want to make sure that they matter. And I believe that pursuing life that way, it'll create that dream as I go.
Well, I have a big dream. And my dream is to stop bullying, harassment, and sexual violence. That is my dream. And I've got a program, a movement I'm starting called Brave. If I ask you, what does the word brave mean to you in that context? What would you say?
Yeah, what came to mind was some reading I was doing probably about 2 years ago in preparation for a training. I was to serve as a facilitator for this week-long training with these women, and they gave me this essay, a series of essays actually, to read about creating brave space. I'd always been taught to create safe space and, come up with the rules and the guidelines that help those who are gathering around safety, and so that everybody can participate. But this was about creating brave space. And so since then, every time I've heard the word brave, it's like I've gone back to those essays. What I took away from it, is really about creating that, because I can't guarantee anybody's safety, right? I cannot guarantee anyone's safety. But what I can guarantee is that I will show up as my bravest and most courageous self, meaning I am willing to be as authentic and as present as I possibly can, and to invite you to do likewise without doing harm to you, and encourage you to be as fully present as possible, and to do that in a way that doesn't bring about harm to oneself or to others.
That's a fabulous interpretation. And especially the part about being present. It is so important that we do things and say things in the moment, especially when we witness some horrendous act that's taking place, that we don't
Exactly. Yeah, because most people in the world are conflict averse, but they don't mind creating conflict, right? But there has to be someone in the space who's willing to call it out, and I think that's part of being fully present. It's not necessarily putting people out, but it's really calling it out and creating an opportunity for truth to be spoken, whatever that needs to be in that moment. Yeah.
What last tips can you give our listeners to help them come out of their hiding, to enable them to be authentic?
Yeah, well, the way I've been talking about this really is around, the chapter in the book is around building a team, but that's really about your circle. It's creating your circle. And I believe that begins with one, right? I don't know that everybody's ready to invite the world into their story, but, it's locating that one person that love, and trust enough to invite into the fullness of who you are, and nurturing that space, nurturing that relationship. And then the two of you finding someone else that love, and trust, and doing likewise, and continuing to build from that space. And I have found that, finding that one voice, for me, it was my mom, that I was able to invite into my story, who, had to get her brain around it, but did, and said, I love you. I'm in this with you. And, and to this day, still on the journey, and my biggest supporter. And for everybody, it won't be a parent. It may be a friend, it may be a teacher, it may be a neighbor, it may be someone who starts out as a stranger, but that stranger can become a familiar stranger and become family to you as you invite them into your narrative and into your story. And so I found that a very helpful place and a helpful way to begin.
Oh, yes. Just to really connect with somebody is so valuable. Cedrick, If you could have a billboard on the side of the road, what would it say?
I think it would be my daily mantra, and it is whatever you do, work at it with all your heart. And so I would want that on every billboard, not just one. I would want it on all billboards. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart.
And what if that's a negative? Something I'm a criminal.
Well, hey, be good at it, right? If you're gonna do it, be good at it. That was one of the things we were told when I was in basic training. Whatever job you get, you be the best at it. If it's cleaning the toilet, you be the best one at it, right? But of course, the assumption is that there's a positive value underneath that, and that it's coming from a place of good, of wanting to do good and aiming to do good in the world. So maybe we would need to add the subtitle, as long as it's improving the lives of others and moving humanity forward. That would be the small print under it, right?
It's wonderful. So any last tips before we end our conversation?
For me, writing this book and being in conversation with folks like you, Lois, really for me is about just continuing the conversation and connecting with folks, not just locally, but around the world, who want to do good and see the world just be a better place for everyone. And so, for me, I would just say, keep the conversations going about the good things that we're doing, about the good work that we want to do. Give all of our energy and our hearts to that. And I believe, that love will win. I believe that good will win. I believe that brave spirit that's within us will somehow come forth if we can commit ourselves to that.
Well, you certainly are an inspiration. Your words are inspiring. Your message is fantastic. And I think the world is very grateful to have you in it.
Thank you so much, Lois. Thank you. And I'll dream your big dream right alongside you.
Fabulous. And I invite everybody, all the listeners out there, I invite them to fly free. You see my butterfly's broken up a little bit. So to fly free, that's my message to the world.
Fly free, yes.
Thank you so much, Cedrick. It's been great talking to you, and I'm sure we'll connect sometime, somewhere in the future.
Thank you so much, Lois, and I'll keep walking without skin. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Walking Without Skin. We would love your feedback, opinions, suggestions, and ratings. Please share this podcast far and wide to encourage more people to share their stories with vulnerability and authenticity.
I wanna live. I want